Peyton was developmentally, for the first 2 years of his life, he really met all of his milestones. It was short of his second birthday, we realized that he wasn't putting two words together. Something just didn't seem right. We started questioning, is there something developmentally that we're missing? We were very active with his pediatrician, trying to figure out what we needed to do. We did hearing tests and various things to kind of rule things out. And we finally had an appointment scheduled with a developmental pediatrician right at 2.5 when he got the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. The developmental pediatrician noted all the classic signs of autism. He wasn't developing language, no eye contact, all those things that you hear over and over again. And that's when it all started.
For us, it was a tough day to go through, and them throwing everything at you about your son having autism and what the world's going to be like and what you're going to do for the rest of his life. So that was a hard day for our family.
I'm Karen Culver.
And I'm Chad Culver. We're Peyton's parents. We have 2 other kids, Caroline and Evan. Evan being the oldest and Caroline's our little one, but we've got 3 kids and live in Knoxville, Tennessee. I think that when Peyton was diagnosed, we really dove into anything we could do that we thought would help him communicate. As in reading the magazines and reading online. We did intensive ABA therapy at our house. We moved into touch chat, proloquo, text.
Sign language.
Sign language. Mm-hmm. We tried everything we could to get him prepared to go to school. So then when we got to the school age, it was a whole new world for us.
They focused at that stage when he went into elementary school. It was a device, and they wanted him to be able to communicate on that device. Use proloquo, and I remember we worked really hard to load it correctly, and they did as well. He would have a school section and a home section, and we tried to implement it at home. They tried to implement it at school, just never really was extremely successful. I don't think Peyton really ever felt like he was, or we never really got a lot of information as far as his wants and things that he liked, and he was never really able to communicate with us fully. And we put him in that class because honestly, we were told that's where he should be. And we trusted the system at the time, and we felt like we were doing the right thing for him. Of course, we had done the ABA intensively before, and we felt like, he's going to be going as prepared as he can to that classroom, and we were hopeful that he would gain skills along the way. He had some great teachers and some great, assistants that helped, and they were so encouraging. Really all throughout his elementary education. I don't think that Peyton would disagree with that. But as time went on and we were introduced when he was 10 to spelling to communicate, and we started seeing that he was able to spell and communicate things that we didn't know he knew. We realized that, oh my goodness, this child is a lot more intelligent than we thought, and he's actually telling us this by spelling it on a letterboard. And he was able to communicate to us that he wanted to get his education. And that's really what fueled us to realize that this is something that he wants. He's telling us this. He's not getting it. What can we do to help him get it? And that's where that shift started, to push to get him out of those classrooms and into a general education curriculum.
I remember one story out of the blue. The therapist on the letterboard asked Peyton about the soccer team where they got stuck in a cave, and we had never talked about it. It had been on the news, but we'd never talked about it to him, and he said they were in Thailand, and he had just heard it. So that's kind of when you start thinking of what he was doing and what he was learning. He's a smart kid, and he was grasping anywhere he could to get the information and get the education. So when he said, I want a general education, I want to be in gen ed, I want to get a regular high school diploma, I'm good enough and I'm smart enough for that, and telling us as parents. And we were very fortunate to have a great advocate and a great therapist, and the schools were it took them a little bit to figure it out, but they finally figured it out, and they come around. And you know, he had some doubters at the school even after 6 months to a year. I think they all kind of figured it out that he was smarter than they thought he was. And when you got a kid typing on a keyboard and you're watching him type and the words are going on the screen, you can't really argue it. You have to understand that kid deserves the chance like every other kid. I remember a doctor early on told us one time, if you don't treat Peyton any different, he won't know any different. So that's what we've always tried to do. We've treated Peyton just like before he can communicate. We treat him just like Evan. We treat him just like Caroline. So I think that's been one thing, not just Karen and I, but our entire family has always just took on the Peyton just like he was. I mean, he wasn't able to speak to him until the last few years with the letterboards and the keyboard, but I mean, he was just Peyton. He's always been just our son, just like Evan or Caroline.
Eyes on it. Ready? Bring those eyes back over. S. I'm Kelley Howe. I'm an occupational therapist and a registered spelling to communicate practitioner. I have been practicing as a spelling to communicate practitioner for about 7 years now, and the biggest thing that I do is I help non-speakers or unreliable speakers take communication from being a really fine motor skill, and I help make it a gross motor skill. The way that we build the motor skills needed to be able to openly and robustly communicate starts by developing the gross motor skill that we need. Almost all non-speakers deal with apraxia, which is a disconnect between the brain and the body. And so we've got to help them create those motor patterns and those motor skills needed to be able to use their bodies effectively. We do that by starting on the alphabet broken out over 3 boards. We've got big targets. They're easy to hit on these stencil boards. We'll poke a pencil through that letter. Or we might use a sensory board where we point to the letter. But we've got bigger targets, they're more spaced out, it's easier to get your body to be accurate. As we develop that motor skill, we move on to a board with 26 letters. Again, it might be a stencil or it might be a sensory board. But now we've got 26 letters, and with 26 letters, there are infinite possibilities as to what you could say. Once we've worked on the 26 board, we might move to a laminate board, which now just is a laminated piece of paper that is taking away that sensory component. It's also a little more portable, which is nice. And then ultimately, we can get to a keyboard, just like you saw Peyton typing. This is a really effective means of communication too, but requires a much higher level of motor skill than some of our other boards. I was first introduced to Peyton through a family friend that knew both my family and the Culvers. I remember the first day that I went to their house to do a consultation like it was yesterday. Peyton was moving all around the kitchen and he was in and out of the room that we were in. And at this point, I knew that he was competent because of my experience with other non-speakers. And so I was able to talk to him age appropriately. He was 10 at the time, and I spoke to him like I'd speak to any other 10-year-old. And even pretty quickly then, he responded to me speaking to him a little bit differently. And that all comes from the presumption of competence. That's a huge cornerstone of what I do in spelling to communicate is I assume that the non-speaker can and wants to learn at an age-appropriate level. Does that mean they know everything? No, absolutely not. But can they learn it? Yes. And that presumption of competence is life-changing. If I could tell families one thing, it's that you can presume competence even before the non-speaker you love is able to fluently communicate. Assume they can and want to learn. Assume they can hear you and understand you and speak to them that way, and you'll start to see changes long before you see that open, fluent communication.
really something that is so misunderstood in this world with autism, is that their bodies may do something, but their brain doesn't want them to do it. But he is able to tell us the challenges he had with his body, and he calls his body ridiculous. And it really makes me sad, but he's lived in that body from his whole life. He's used to it.
A couple years ago in school, maybe last year, they kept wanting to push speech. They kept wanting to give him speech therapy. And finally, Peyton said on the letterboard, quit with the speech therapy. I'm not talking, we need to concentrate on spell to communicate. And that was neat to see. All these years we had pushed and get him to do this, and for him to say, I'm done with this, I want to concentrate on what works for me. That was a neat step too.
That was very, very cool, because we thought, here he is, it's shifted. Before it was us saying, oh, we need to try this. Now we have a son who says, this is what works for me, let's do it. And it's just a wonderful feeling to know that we obviously can help him, but now he has a way to tell us what works and what doesn't.
And he tells you everything he wants now. I mean, you kind of have to do, we ask him, what do you want to do for vacation? I want to go to the beach. So, he loves the beach. So that's something 5 years ago, we would have known that. We'd have been, hey, we're going to the mountains. But now we know. It's cool to see him finally get his chance after all those years to tell us what his likes and dislikes are. About 2 years ago, we started the Peyton Project. It was a 501c3 foundation that Peyton wanted to start to help other non-speakers like him. It was started, the first donation was $250 of Peyton's birthday and Christmas money is how we started the foundation. Now we use all money raised to help other kids like Peyton with spelling to communicate, or to help therapists be trained to utilize spelling to communicate for their clients. The foundation is 100% Peyton driven in what he wants and what he thinks helps other people.
And it's completely communication, and it may not be spelling to communicate. It may be something else that will help an individual, find that way to communicate. But Peyton's focus is, and he's conveyed this many times, or his mission is he really wants to help others find their way to communicate like he did. And being silenced for so many years has motivated him tremendously. And I think this foundation is something that's very important to him, and it will be for the rest of his life.
As parents, it makes us very proud to see, the passion that Peyton has for this foundation and the work it's going to do in the future. You couldn't be prouder than to watch your kids excel at something they enjoy.
We look at him and are amazed at how far he's come from that young child who we thought would never have a voice, and the voice that he has now is beyond what we would have ever expected. And we want that. He wants that for all the other people out there who are unable to communicate.
I have always had a drive that stemmed from the early years when I was having a hard time getting the world to understand me. My world was a hard one because I could not communicate at all. Years of being trapped in my body led to my desire to want to help others if I got out of my trap. My many years being so misunderstood has led me to my desire to help those that cannot find a reliable form of communication.
My foundation is my idea to find a way to reach others like myself around the world. My plan is to start helping and find a way to get all non-speakers a way to communicate. The Peyton Project is my vessel to carry out this life mission of mine. My sole purpose in this foundation is to make others non-speakers have an easier life and be heard.